Check.
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 Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Elthon,
Here.
Pritchard,
Here.
Nystrom,
Here.
Teben,
Here.
Melhouse.
Here. Okay, the first item on agenda for this special meeting is consideration of sealed bids opened and reviewed by the superintendent of schools, the secretary of the board, and the financial advisor, whom I see Matt here right now, so I'll let you three take over.
All right, well, good evening, board. I'm going to go over the packet that I set there on the table in front of you all. We'll begin with the first page here, which shows that the top of the page under where it says report of sale, the rating for the school district A+, that was reiterated from the the same rating, that you had seen earlier this year when you sold your new voted general obligation bonds. You can also see in that section under report of sale, we were originally asking these bidders to bid on the amount of $7,725,000. And then ultimately, once we had those bids in hand, we were able to reduce that amount to $7,410,000. Part of that is costs, but a big part of it is cash that the district had, which we'll look at in just a moment. So looking at the bids themselves, you can see that there were 4 bids received. The low bidder from UMB Bank, that's United Missouri Bank in Kansas City. And if you remember from this past summer, selling your prior bonds, we're looking at that true interest rate in the bottom right-hand corner of each section. So for the winning bid, that would be the 1.280 number compared to the second place bid, which is right below that from D.A. Davidson, 1.333. And then what's in that rectangle there next to the winning bid, that's after we were able to resize it. So once we knew that they were the winner, then we started to push principal around to make sure that we met all of the tax rules, et cetera, and put in the cash that the district had. So the net final result is that true interest rate of 1.273. If you go to the second page, you see there the sources and uses of the funds. So ultimately here you're issuing $7,410,000 of new bond principal to pay off the old bonds. Part of the structure of the bid, which was very similar to what happened with your issuance earlier this year, was an original issue premium. In this case, it was $200,636. And again, we'll see that on another page as well. You do owe the prior bondholder, or you will owe the prior bondholder some interest because you're going to make a payment on these bonds next week on November 1st. There's a scheduled payment. That payment is not impacted by this refinancing. And then you'll owe those bondholders interest from November 1st to December 1st. And that's what that $19,280 number is. And then you see a big number, $236,000. So while we were sitting there before the bids were taken this afternoon, Mitch told me that the district had a whole bunch of cash sitting in your debt service fund, this is a great opportunity to use that cash because there's very few things that you can actually use it for. This would be one of them, which is a cash contribution to refinancing, which lowers the amount of new principal that you need to issue. Therefore, you're paying interest on a smaller amount of principal. So that cash will be consumed when this transaction closes on December 1st. And then on the bottom half of the page, you see $68,000 in costs of issuance. That's your attorney, Allers & Cooney, Standard & Poor's for the rating, and the Piper Sandler, the company I work for, and United Missouri Bank. They're a different department than the part of the bank that's buying the bonds from you, but they're also your paying agent, which there's a small amount of fee for that. The underwriter's discount, $53,261. That's the fee that UMB is charging as their profit for the transaction. That's not quite half, but a little bit close to half of what I expected it to be. And then the big number there, 7744, $7.7 million. It says that it's an escrow deposit. That's just the way this software works. It's not an escrow because you're paying these bonds off very quickly. It's what it's called a current refunding. So it really just means the amount of cash that you need. That includes the $19,280 in accrued interest. So other than that, you'll be paying off the $7.7 million in old bond principal. If you look at the next page, the top right corner says page 2. This is the new debt service schedule. So this is what Mitch will begin to use beginning this coming May 1st when making the payments on this debt. You can see the debt still goes out to 2031. That's the same term as you had. Actually, it's a year shorter, than what you had before. And the interest rates ranging from 1% up to 2%. But actually, that's a little bit deceiving. You'll see the true yields, which is really the more important thing, on the next page. So if you go to that page, this is the page that's sitting landscape, and there's some hand-drawn geometry on there. The square that's around the rate, yield, and price, and again, you may remember this from this past summer's transaction, and as I said then, I will say it again now, you don't have to understand this, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway, and that is how is this premium generated. So the interest rates that the school district will pay these bondholders, the new bondholders, which ranges from the 1% to 2%, but it's the yield that is the most important thing. That's what we actually compare your bond issue to yesterday's or tomorrow's or a month from now, or we would compare that to a CD rate at the bank or a dividend rate with a stock that you may own. Although with the difference that this interest is tax exempt from federal income taxes. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. For example, whoever owns these bonds with the maturity that will be paid off next May 1st, they're earning a 0.2% yield, but it's actually worth a little bit more than that because they're not paying federal income taxes. Whereas with stock that you might, or interest that you may get from a dividend, let's say from McDonald's or the bank CD or something, you would be paying federal income taxes on that. So this equates to a slightly higher than 0.2% yield. And it's those numbers that we look to then, as I said, to compare to other issues. I was at Marcus Merritt Cleghorn in Northwest Iowa a week ago today. They were selling brand new bonds. So they were selling a 20-year structure. So their tick, that number on the first page, we don't compare that because that's not apples to apples. But if we just simply look at the yields, they had literally almost identical yields as to what you have. So that tells us, A, that the market hasn't moved very much in a week because you got basically the same thing as they did, and as well as that the bidding is accurate. There's not somebody that's coming from left field that's got some super aggressive, unexpected, or the opposite as well, a terrible bid. These are bids that are basically right on top of each other. You see then the circled number, the difference between that rate and yield works out to be that premium of $200,000 that comes to you up front. So you are in fact paying slightly higher interest rates, but you're getting that cash up front, which also helps reduce the amount of principal. So the net effect is that you're still saving more money. And you don't, again, have to really understand that. On the next page, this is where there's probably more information of interest to you. So on the top left part of this page, that's the old bonds. So you are paying off $7,725,000 of principal. You see the interest rates that were associated with those bonds between 2.25 and 3.25%. Those rates actually were quite low when those bonds were issued, and historically they are still really low. It's just that today rates are so super low that you could actually feasibly refinance debt with that low interest. Where you see that arrow pointing, again, not the big fat arrow, but just in the top left quadrant there, to that $545,000 amount. That $545,000 amount is what's left of that maturity, those bonds that mature in 2032, because you as a board in fiscal year 21 already enacted what's called a surplus levy. So you levied more cash in that year in your debt service fund, and you already paid off some of this principal. You paid that off this past May 1st when those bonds originally became callable. And when you did that, you saved $282,000 just from that action alone. So the $545,000 is what was left, so that's the amount that's being refinanced as part of this transaction. The bottom left or bottom part of the page, the bottom left part is just, again, the debt service schedule, so that matches that clean version that we saw a couple pages prior. But then where you see that fat arrow on the bottom half pointing downward, this is where you see the savings. So it's literally just netting out the old payment versus the new payment. And you see the number in the box at the bottom of $1.19 million. And while I wish that I could say that was the savings, that's including the $260,000 or $236,000, excuse me, that you're contributing. So that doesn't count as savings. So the amount that's circled there, $960,475. That's the actual amount of property taxes that you will not have to levy over the course of the repayment of this debt that you otherwise would have levied. So that is a real number that is you're saving your taxpayers. If you look at the very top right then, where you see the big fat arrow pointing to the right and the kind of little star thing saying, look here, that is just a summary because the district has refinanced a lot of bonds over the last decade. You've done a lot of activity, some of you on this board and some on prior boards, but you've been doing very good things. And Mitch and I were talking about this earlier as we were finishing the revision of the bid, and we wanted to point this out to the school board and especially also to the community, people that may be here tonight or that might be listening to the recorded version of this. It's quite often, I think, and I can say this from my experience in my own home school district, unfortunately, that your citizens are not really that appreciative of you right now, I think, and I'm not specifically talking about you here at Boone, but school board members in general. You're getting a lot of grief for various reasons. Maybe some of it's warranted, I don't know, but I wanted to point out to you as board members and again to community members that the school board is doing really good things. What you see in that box is showing that over the last decade, basically, by refinancing and that 1 year's action as a surplus levy in fiscal year 21, you have literally saved taxpayers $2,317,377 by simply taking action to refinance bonds, and that's over a number of different transactions. But again, that is property tax that will never be levied because you did refinance those bonds. And you've done the same thing with sales tax bonds, although that doesn't impact property taxes. It is still taxes that are the people's money, and you have done the same thing, refinancing bonds a couple times over the last couple years, and you've saved your district's sales tax fund $1,232,370. So that's the equivalent, not quite exactly, but it's probably about 9 school buses that you have saved. So it's kind of like getting 9 free school buses or a ton of lap-to-lap computers for your students that you, of course, you are paying for them, but you would have even paid more. So this interest savings is sort of like the equivalent of those school buses or laptops. So it's a very positive thing that the board has been doing, taking that action, and both Mitch and I wanted to point that out to you. I'm sure that you as a board had some idea that you've been doing that since you've been taking action on it, but we also want to make sure your community is aware of that. So if you go to the last page, we just have the timeline there, which I think Mitch has probably already made you aware of. We're basically through it for the most part. We're at October 25th, so here in just a moment you're, I assume, going to award to the lowest bidder and then also approve of the call of the old bonds. But at your meeting on November 15th, that's when you'll do the typical legal paperwork. And again, it's identical to what you did earlier this year. It's always the same with every bond issuance. So that'll be very simple. It'll just take you a couple minutes to get through that. And then the transaction will close on December 1st. So on December 1st, the new bond money is going to come into your accounts, and simultaneously money is going to go out of the account to pay off the old bonds, and that will all take place on December 1st. So if you happen to own some of the old bonds, or if you know someone that owns the old bonds, they will no longer be earning interest after December 1. They're going to get their money back, and they can go do with it whatever they want. But the school district will be saving almost $1 million. Any questions about that? What happened after this afternoon, or what will happen at the next meeting? Just the process in general. If not, I'm going to lead you through the 2 resolutions that you have. It is acceptable for me to do that. I'm going to start with the award, and all one of you board members needs to do is so move what I say. And another board member will need to second that motion, and then Mitch, you'll have to have a roll call vote. So the first resolution before you is directing the sale of $7,410,000 of general obligation school refunding bonds, Series 2021B, to United Missouri Bank of Kansas City, Missouri.
So move.
Roll, any further discussion first? Hearing no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Elfon,
Yes.
Nystrom. Pritchard,
Yes.
Teven,
Yes.
Melhouse.
Yes.
Okay, that is all of that action. The other item that you have is just directing United Missouri Bank, again, coincidentally, they're not related directly to the purchaser of your bonds today. One of the divisions is the paying agent corporate trust department, and that's what this is intended to be, directing them to make the 30-day notice of the call and to eventually on December 1 call and pay off the $7,725,000 remaining of the Series May 1, 2012 bonds.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Elfon,
Yes.
Nystrom. Pritchard,
Yes.
Teven,
Yes.
Melhouse.
Yes.
Okay, that is it. So if you do have questions after the fact, if anybody in the community has questions for you that you're not quite sure of the answers to, let Mitch or Julie know. They know how to get a hold of me typically, and we can answer questions for you or your community members. Otherwise, congratulations, another very successful refinancing for Boone Schools, and we hope that rates stay similar to where they are today, because you have another issuance of sales tax bonds that will happen this spring and another refinancing that we hope will as well still work. So we'll keep our eye on those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gillespie. Any further questions from anyone? Moving on to item 3 on the agenda, establish bid date of December 7th, 2021 at 2 p.m. for Boone ECC.
So we've talked about this, and we have been able to maintain our dates that we were trying to meet. So I just recommend that we set the bid date for December 7th, 2021 for the new elementary school.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve setting the bid date for the ECC as December 7th, 2 p.m.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Pritchard, seconded by Dr. Nystrom to approve the establishment of the bid date of December 7th, 2021 at 2 p.m. for the Boone Early Childhood Center. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item is establishing public hearing date of December 13th, 2021 for the Boone ECC. Ms. Struba.
So we just have to have a public hearing on the 13th of December for the new early childhood center or the new elementary building. So this is just part of the process of having the new building.
I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we establish a public hearing date for December 13th, 2021 for the Boone Early Childhood Center.
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Ms. Stevens, seconded by Dr. Nystrom to establish public hearing date of December 13th, 2021 for the Boone Early Childhood Center. Any questions, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same signal. Motion passes unanimously. Seeing no other business, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. It's been moved by Mr. Elfman, seconded by Mr. Pritchard to adjourn this meeting. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.